friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation.
Iowa banks know you want honest advice about how to best reach your financial goals, whether it's financing an education, buying a new home, growing a business, or funding retirement. Iowa Banks, Iowa Values. BuyIowaBank.com.
For more than 40 years, Iowa Press has brought you politicians and newsmakers from across Iowa and beyond. In 2012, Iowa Public Television brings you debates in each of Iowa's 4 congressional districts. Live from the Arts Center on the campus of Iowa Western Community College in Council Bluffs, here is Dean Board.
Is up for election. In this election cycle, reapportionment of the congressional districts reflecting shifting population is downsizing Iowa's Washington delegation from 5 to 4. Well, that places incumbent Republican Tom Latham against incumbent Democrat Leonard Boswell in Iowa's new 3rd congressional district, encompassing southwest Iowa from Des Moines to Council Bluffs. And this campaign is receiving national attention because it's one of only 2 across the entire country involving incumbents for the U.S. House of Representatives. Both are political veterans. Congressman Boswell seeking a 9th term, Congressman Latham wants a 10th. Gentlemen, welcome back to Iowa Press.
Thank you.
And both of you are familiar with the Iowa Press format, but we're in a different setting here with an audience, in addition to our television viewers. But they promise to watch and listen, but they won't be participating with cheering. As usual, I'll be moderating our discussion, and questions on this special hour-long edition of Iowa Press will be coming from Omaha World-Herald Chief Political Writer Robin Tesford, Des Moines Register political columnist Kathy Obranovich, and Radio Iowa News Director Kay Henderson.
Gentlemen, I want to begin by asking you a question about an institution with which all Iowans interact, the post office. Mr. Boswell, how do you fix what's going wrong with the post office?
How do you fix the post office? Well, I think we probably ought to look for the efficiencies. We probably have learned a lot from Federal Express and UPS. Take advantage of those and see what we do. But I know one thing, that rural folks would like to have their post office.
What about Saturday delivery?
I think maybe Saturday delivery would be something we could think about.
Mr. Latham?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for hosting this tonight, and to Iowa Western Community College, such a great, beautiful place here for having us here. But the post office obviously has huge financial difficulties. One problem is that they have overpaid into their pension plan for about 75 years in advance, and to be able to keep those funds rather than and have that go into operations would help them dramatically. I'm very concerned, certainly in rural Iowa, that we lose the 6-day service. I don't think it has any benefit for the post office in that that's the day that UPS and FedEx pay the Postal Service to deliver those packages, so it's going to cut off a source of revenue also.
Mr. Boswell, would you support changes in the pension plan for the USPS?
Well, I think so, yeah. I think we ought to take a look at that and see. I would guess that there's always an opportunity to look at it and see if there's things to do to improve it. And as you've heard me say many times in my life, let's look at it. If it's okay, leave it alone. If it's not, then do something about it. But I think it's okay to look at anything.
Let me just ask, would you rush to save every rural post office in that district if you're reelected?
Oh, probably not, but I would certainly look it over very carefully because it's something that's very important to the folks out there, and I'd look at it very carefully, but I'd want to have a lot of data that we don't have now.
Mr. Latham, would you defend every one of those?
Well, I think it's, the post office in a lot of the small towns is such an important part of that community. Now, whether you had shorter hours, the same postmaster maybe would work in 2 different locations, something like that, but it's a very important part. My hometown of 168 people, that's a big deal in Alexander, Iowa.
My hometown's much bigger. It's almost 240 something.
Mr. Latham, as you know, as both of you know, last year there was a historic flood on the Missouri River, a flood that cost millions. In the wake of that flood, do we need to relook at the Corps' management plan? And can you give me some specifics on how you would like to see that changed?
Thank you, Robin, for that. That's a great question. Obviously, last year was an incredibly difficult time along the Missouri River. I was on the levee down in Percival on 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and that levee went out overnight, and the devastation that caused. We certainly, I think, have to look at the river management to take into consideration flood control on humans first. It's been diverted the efforts for fishing, endangered species, things like that, but our number one priority has to be humans. I would like to mention, last year we had the FEMA disaster bill on the floor, and I quite honestly was very surprised. Congressman Boswell twice voted against funding for FEMA in favor of electric car, and that's been such a disaster. But twice voted against funding when we had this disaster going on last year.
And I'm sure, Mr. Boswell, you're going to want to respond to that.
I certainly would, and of course there's a lot of other factors that you know, Tom, were involved with that, and it was a process in place. But the Missouri River is very important to us. It's a navigation source, and having served a lot of time in the military myself, the Corps of Engineers is a military organization. And they pretty much respond to what we ask them to do. We want navigation, we want flood control, we want the many different things to put on their plate. And I think they do a pretty good job. They try very hard to follow and develop what we ask them to do.
So, if I could interrupt you, do you think the Corps deserves any of the blame for what happened in the
I think the Corps is willing to review. I think it's time to review. There's someone who out just hammer the Corps. Well, I think the Corps is willing and ready to say, okay, you're changing the rules around a little bit. What do you want? You want conservation? Do you want flood control? Well, flood control is the most important thing. I believe that. I think they know that, but it's Congress probably that's setting the rules and the requirements on what they have to come up with in their plan. It's time to review that plan.
Mr. Boswell, Mr. Latham brought up that at the vote about the electric car. You didn't address that. You said there were other factors involved. For people at home, what were those factors?
Well, the factors are, where are you going to put the emphasis? And I didn't have that cleared up yet, but it's the flood control. They've got requirements to have maintain basin levels and things like that. And it didn't take into account the heavy snow and the unexpected rain. And those things hadn't been thrashed through yet, but there was still time to flood. The FEMA was never without money.
Well, what was it? Either the electric car or FEMA?
The what?
Either the electric car or FEMA?
It was. And this was when FEMA came to Congress and said that they were running out of money because of the disasters like the flooding on the Missouri River. And we had to offset the funding that we wanted to put into disaster relief. We were taking money away from the electric car, which has been a disaster, as the government will tell you today. But twice, Mr. Boswell, Congressman Boswell, voted in favor of the electric cars rather than helping folks here that are devastated by floods.
Congressman Boswell.
Well, first off, FEMA did not run out of money, and there was plenty of opportunity to take care of that. And there we are in an energy crisis trying to get the electric car going, which, by the way, seems to be going pretty good. And at the same time, we did not run out of money. I was out here as much as you were. I was down at Hamburg when they were scrambling to get that dike put up the last minute. And I'm very conscious about making sure that FEMA was ready to react, and they were. And so you can hang doom and gloom moment if you like to do, but we were able to navigate and do the things we need to do. And still take care of it.
FEMA came to us and wanted money. They were desperate.
And they never failed to do that.
Mr. Boswell, we've talked about some pretty specific issues, but I want to talk now a little bit about your priorities. If you could wave a magic wand and put a bill on the president's desk and know that it would be signed into law, what would that bill be?
Well, I would put everybody back to work if I could and stop the things going out to...
But legislation can't put people back to work. The wand isn't quite that magical. It's got to be some legislation that you could put in place on the president's desk.
Well, I think we'd put legislation on his desk that would be a major step towards balancing the budget and making sure we're living within our means. and put our country's fiscal responsibility back in control, start that process that needs to happen.
Okay, that's a wish list, but is there one specific piece of
I think
legislation that you would want to?
I think balancing the budget is pretty specific,
Okay.
so I don't know where you're trying to go with me, Kathy, but seriously, I think that would be a major thing. People are concerned about it. Again, Amnesia said it how we got to. We've got to deal with it. It's here. We've got to deal with the deficit, and we've got to deal with the debt, and everybody got to participate in it. And I think that'd be a very good thing for us. I'd like to get back to pay as you go.
Okay.
I think pay as you go is something that's very
You gave me one specific thing, and we'll come back to
balanced
that.
balanced budget.
Balanced budget, Mr. Latham.
Well, it wouldn't necessarily take the president's signature, but an amendment to the Constitution for a balanced budget. I think would save us long term. And just like Iowa has to have a balanced budget, the federal government should too. It's going to be very difficult to get there. In the meantime, what we've got to do is to have tax policy that is going to encourage growth and investment in job creation.
But of all the things we could have, a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution,
Absolutely.
that's the one thing.
Absolutely.
Okay.